Okay, my name is Jose Enrique Iglesias. I am a teacher. I'm the director of a public adult education school here in Ubrique, in the province of Cádiz in Spain. I've been teaching in the field of adult education for more than 30 years. And currently I am teaching Spanish as a second language. Yes, doing the management of my institution. I started working in adult education, as I said, 30 years ago. I started in a refugee camp in Central America. I worked for United Nations for 3 years in a refugee camp. And then from 2004 till 2011, I've been working also with the refugees in the refugee camp of Sahrawi in Algeria. And as a teacher here in Spain, I have been teaching Spanish as a second language for migrants for many, many years. And currently I still teaching Spanish for migrants. Well, it's hard if I had to explain to a 5 years old child what integration means, I would say, okay, everybody knows that in a farm, chicken, ducks, and sheep or goats can live together without any problem. But just imagine you are a little chick and your rooster father and your hen mother and your brothers have to move to a farm where dogs rule, and the dogs tell you that you have to learn how to swim, and then you have to learn how to say quack quack instead of kikiriki, and you have to behave as a chicken. So integration is a process by which a society adapt itself to newcomers. In integration, there are always two actors. On the one hand, you have the newcomers. Obviously, they must adapt themselves to new environment, to education, culture, housing, employment, everything. I mean, they do this. They adapt themselves more or less quickly to the new circumstances, but I think the key of the integration is more in the hands of the receiving society. The receiving society is less flexible. I'm not saying that it's reluctant to make changes, but it is harder for our society to make big changes in their structures to be adapted to the newcomers. So integration is a long process. I think the key of the integration is the adaptation to the newcomers. I'm not saying that the newcomers have to, they don't have to adapt themselves. Obviously, they have to respect the rules. They have to know their duties, and usually it's not a problem. I mean, at least in my nearest environment, I don't see problems of adaptation of newcomers, but from the other side, I see difficulties. I mean, people and institutions are not well prepared for receiving these newcomers. Mostly the misunderstanding come from the use of myths that sometimes are spread by populist politicians, like migrants will take our jobs. Migrants will collapse our health system, our education system, our welfare system. And figures and statistics say the opposite. I mean, those myths are obviously not true, but it is very easy to convince some sectors of our society, of the receiving society. I mean, people which is unemployed or which are facing difficulties. It is very easy to convince them that newcomers are taking their job, they are taking the welfare funds. It's quite easy. So it's a lack of information. It's a lack of true information. For instance, recently I read a report here in our country, in Spain. It's a report from 2017, and the report of the Ministry of Health. It says that migrants in Spain in 2017 are net contributors to the health system, which means they pay more taxes for the health system than the total amount of money the health system is spent in attending migrants, because obviously they are younger than the rest of the population, because they are working. They are people in the age of working. I mean, it's not true that they are receiving more than they are giving, but this type of myths are very well extended, and they are used by, as I said, populism to convince some sectors of society, and this is quite dangerous. We have witnessing that in many countries here in Europe and around the world, in many countries, those populism are now in the governments, and this is quite dangerous. There are many challenges. I have to say that here in Spain, our education system is not providing a decent response to the demands of the newcomers. I mean, we can see in many schools, in some schools, especially in areas where the migrant population is higher, even though they have programs to attend to receive these new students, at the end, at least the first year for new students, for migrant students, is lost because they have difficulties with the language. We don't have specialists in teaching Spanish in our schools. It's something that must change in our system. And at the end, I mean, they end up learning Spanish and catching the rest of the students, but at least the first year is lost in most of our schools. And as I said, it's something that must change in our system. But on the other hand, it's a great opportunity for our children, for the children of the receiving society, if children grow up in a diverse environment. In one school, you have children from different countries with different even religion, languages, etc. You will accept them as something normal in their life. This is not only for migrants, but for people with different capabilities. For instance, we can see that many of our prejudices against people different, like people with different capabilities, or different sex, like homosexual, or different, I mean, differences are not well accepted in a society. As I said, society takes longer to change than people. So if you grow up in a school with that diversity, you will end up being an adult that accept this diversity. I think it's a very positive input for our educational system to have this diversity. Here where we live is not, I mean, we don't have the amount of migrants that big cities or low medium-sized cities have, like Seville or Madrid or Barcelona, where multiculturalism is more extended. But I've been teaching Spanish with to migrants for many years here, and they've never told me that they have faced this kind of difficulties of integration, or they don't feel bad for or poorly treated. But sometimes I found not arguments, but discussions about the customs or the beliefs for specifically with Muslim students. I have heard many times some of local students ask Muslim students, "Why are you wearing the hijab? You don't need to wear the hijab. It's just too hot. It's summer. You don't have to wear." This kind of comments are sometimes difficult to deal with in class. Or now, for instance, we are in the Ramadan month, and I've heard this week actually some of my students ask the Muslim student, "Why are you fasting? You don't have to fast. It's too hard. You don't need to fast. Why are you fasting?" This kind of things is are very personal. I mean, I wouldn't never think about asking this kind of question if you don't know, if he or she is not a friend of yours. I mean, but it's something very anecdotic. They don't have real issues of integration. I think the key is in the communication, in knowing each other, in sharing freely your in explaining why you behave the way you behave, where you come from, how is your country, what are your customs, and I mean, I think we share more than we at first think when we think of newcomers. And communication is key, because if you know others, if you know where they come from, why they came here, you can be you can, I mean, you can put yourself in the shoes of others. And it's, I think, once again, communication is essential, and it is a problem. When I think of some of my students, the language, the local language, is a real boundary. It's a real problem that divides local population with newcomers. Language is essential. If you don't master the basis of the local language, you will never integrate. You will never find the way to be accepted. In the other hand, the local population, if they cannot communicate with newcomers, when there's no communication, the integration is impossible, totally impossible. So we have to make more efforts in helping newcomers to learn our language, to understand also our culture. But woefully, the our system is not providing well, a structured system of teaching the new language and new culture to migrants, because once they find a job, they quit. They quit school. I mean, they start attending my classes, for instance, for 1 2 months. But once they get a job, they take the job and they don't attend the classes. And mostly in this area, migrants come from Morocco. They are women that take care of elderly at home. They are living in houses and the whole time there, and they have no communication at all with the rest of the people. They are taking care from of people with Alzheimer or with dementia, and they don't speak with Spanish people. So I have students that have been here for 5 6 years and don't speak a single word in Spanish, and just a few basic words. They find it very difficult to be accepted once again for the rest of our society, because they don't speak Spanish. So this is it's a big problem. As far as I understand, digital storytelling is kind of sharing your personal stories through the social network, for instance. I'm not very familiar, I have to say that, with this concept, but well, I think it's something that is growing because the digital tools are widely spread in our society, and every day people uh, use a social network to share things, to share personal stories, to share everything, to teach, to learn, to, I mean, there's a, but I'm not very familiar with digital storytelling. I think these tools can be very interesting to use them for integration, because, as I said before, if you know others, you will better understand why they are here and where they come from, and you can understand and you can easily communicate with them or understand why they have to leave their country. So I think it can be a very powerful tool in for integration. I think it's very interesting. I don't know how to make it possible, but I think it is very it is a very powerful tool to get closer to others, to other histories, to other backgrounds, to other